Family business makes no sense. So let's talk about it.
Welcome. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. This is another episode in the series Family Business Makes No Sense. And today I'm talking about broken wing syndrome. Now, unlike founder syndrome and imposter syndrome that we've talked about in earlier videos, broken wing syndrome is completely my own invention. And it comes from having observed a lot of families in business where an individual is being protected by a matriarch or patriarch like a bird with a broken wing. Now, on any rational analysis, nobody should be mixing a family with a business, because the things that make a family work well and be happy are in direct contradiction to the things that make businesses successful financially. However, there are an awful lot of family businesses out there, and some of them are very, very good businesses. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what's the difference between the successful ones and the could have been successful ones? In my experience, a lot of it comes down to awareness of the common causes of conflict and taking active steps to prevent conflicts from arising or from developing into something too damaging that harms the family and or the business. So today, let's go into broken wing syndrome because it is very high on my list of 50 common causes of family business conflict. What is broken wing syndrome? It occurs when a misguided, over-nurturing or guilt-ridden parent extends a protective wing over an underforming progeny. For some reason that probably involves triangles, but it needs a psychologist to explain it to me, this seems to be a cross-gender phenomenon where most often you will find mothers protecting sons and fathers protecting daughters. It happens with fathers and sons and mothers and daughters, but that seems to be much, much less common, in my experience at least. There's no malice intended with broken wing syndrome. It is simply something that a parent feels obliged to do to protect a weaker child of their loins, particularly if there are high-performing siblings in the mix. Now, this can apply to children, inverted commas, who might be anything from their mid to late 20s right up into their 60s. And I've certainly worked with families where parents are in their late 80s and they dare not step down. So we've now impacted the succession process because they fear that the moment they're out of the mix, they're much more competent children, one or several, knowing the real worth and contribution of the weaker sibling with the broken wing, the non-performer, will not put up with them the way the parents do and will kick them out of the business. And quite often we find that the broken wing child is the one that's produced grandchildren from the parents. And so the parents not only feel a protective responsibility towards the child that probably could not earn anything like as good an income or have as prestigious a job anywhere in the outside world, they're not only protecting them, they're also protecting their grandkids. And so they are deeply, deeply caught up in this. And that in itself can create a lot of conflict between matriarchs and patriarchs. Again, based on my experience, I often find that the fathers have a reasonably clear-eyed commercial view of the worth of their kids in the business. You may well find a doting father and a favourite daughter, And sometimes you find the bizarre situation where a father will provide all sorts of preferences for a daughter that's never had anything to do with the business over a son that's dedicated 20, 30, 40 years of their life to supporting the family through the business and helping to grow it to where it is. That's not really what we're talking about here. That's more favoritism. Here we're talking about family members who don't perform. Now, one of the big problems that we find is that the child with a broken wing is put into a position in the business that may have significant prestige and quite a lot of importance, but it doesn't appear to do immediate damage. And the classic one is sales and marketing. Now, how long, how big, how high, how wide are your sales and marketing pipelines? Because it's so arguable, until it starts to have a really adverse impact on the business, for some reason marketing seems to be a safe place to put a non-performing child. But when you have a situation where, for example, you have a retailer whose 60% to 70% of their sales take place around the Christmas catalogue time, and you have a son or a daughter who's in charge of marketing that consistently fails to get the catalogues out in time, consistently fails to do the online marketing, consistently fails to set up a decent CRM system to get to clients, and therefore year after year the business misses its critical marketing season, ultimately that business is going to be in serious trouble. Best people are going to leave. Children who are working their guts out are going to say, what's the point? We can make all this stuff, we can have all these buildings and staff, but we never get the customers through the door because we're not marketing, because little Amy always fails to produce the catalogue on time. So that's where it starts to become a major problem. That's where it starts to turn off key staff. That's where it creates a lot of conflict between siblings and also between parents, because you'll get matriarch who wants to do the protecting and the patriarch who says we've got to save the business or we won't have anything left to protect. So how do you deal with broken wing syndrome when it's there? What are the strategies and solutions we can adopt to deal with it? Well, the first thing we need to do is try to get some of the personalities out of the equation, at least in the business environment, and focus on the business issues. We want to be business first in the business, and we need to look at the objective facts of what is going on, what is going wrong, and what do we need to do about it, which in itself will probably diagnose the key failure of the critical individual. We need to put a fair bit of focus on the parent and on the crippled bird, and we need to enable them to face some sort of reality, and we need in the process to have an escape hatch. The main thing we're probably going to need to do is say the broken wing and the family protection is a family problem, not a business problem. That person is a cancer in the business. If we cannot put them somewhere where they're not going to distress anybody else, and that usually requires a very large business, and large businesses usually have policies and procedures which won't allow that to happen. In a small business, this can have an enormous impact on staff, results, family, and so on, and it's just not going to work. So if we're a business first business, we need to make business-like decisions. We need to take the broken wing out of the business and treat them as a family project, which means the business needs to be working well enough to be able to afford to solve the problem in some other way. The alternative is a significant retraining where you place somebody in a role that they can properly discharge, and then perhaps the family makes up some additional remuneration because they are effectively demoted half a dozen levels to a space where they can't do any damage and where maybe they can be effective because they find the right levels. So broken wing syndrome is something which, whenever I come across it and I describe it and explain it, it helps families to normalise the situation they're in, recognise that many other families have done the same thing, that it's not something that proceeds from a desire for malice or preferment or anything like that, but it is a natural piece of family nurturing which is at odds with the requirements of running an effective business. If you found this useful, please like, please subscribe, please let other people know that we're talking about these issues in an attempt to share our learnings and help other people in family businesses make sense of being in a family business. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist from Melbourne in Australia. Thanks for watching.